Out of all the Prime weapons that have released in the last year or so, this is the one I was looking forward to the most. Because the Acceltra is one of the most fun weapons in the game. I mean, just the description alone sounds amazing. Fully automatic, rapid-fire micro-missile launcher. Like, what more do you want? It requires Mastery Rank 14, it does 44 impact damage with the, well, impact of the micro rocket, which then explodes in a 5-meter area, dealing 53 damage, most of which is puncture, but there is a bit of slash in there as well. When compared to the standard Acceltra, you can see that it does fire a little bit slower, but in return it reloads faster, it has better crit chance and multiplier, considerably higher status chance, does much more damage, and it has a bigger explosion. The game changer here is the status chance. Yes, the damage is nice, but having 18% status as opposed to 6 is huge. Like the standard Acceltra, the Prime also has minimum arming distance on its micro rockets, which is 7 meters. So the micro rockets will not explode unless they've traveled for more than 7 meters. So you definitely want to keep your distance. This is helped somewhat with the fact that direct rocket hits have a forced impact proc on them, so you can stagger enemies very easily. Direct hits are something you definitely want to take advantage of with the Acceltra and the Prime, and not just because of that forced impact proc, but also because the direct impact of the rocket is a considerable portion of your damage. Think of the Acceltra as more of a rifle with an explosive bonus on top rather than just a straight up explosive weapon. This is actually even more true on the Prime than on the standard one, as compared to the standard one you get 18 more damage on the direct impact but only 9 more damage on the explosion. So if you can hit something directly, do it. And finally, just like the standard Acceltra, the Prime also reloads 25% faster if you're sprinting or 50% faster if you're sprinting whilst playing as Gauss or Gauss Prime. A good starting build for the weapon, if you don't have too many fancy mods, is gonna be something like this, just a hybrid with either corrosive and heat or corrosive and cold. This build feels pretty good as a starter build, and it will absolutely demolish the star chart for you, which will help you farm some fancier mods to do some fancier builds. Don't expect too much from it though, because it does fall off pretty fast once you get into Steel Path. As far as more advanced builds go, the easiest way to get good damage scaling out of the Acceltra is to just run a hybrid with Viro and Hunter munitions. It is a bit fiddly because you will have to swap Bane mods around since they're too big of a damage boost for damage over time builds to not use, but you do have a flex slot in here which I filled in with Hammer Shot, which feels absolutely fantastic on the Acceltra Prime because it gives you more crit damage and status chance. However, if you're not a big fan of Hammer Shot, there are some other mods you can swap in instead. Galvanized Scope is great if you don't mind aiming down sights for a ton of extra crit chance. You can run Primed Firestorm for less damage but a ton of extra AoE. Or you can slap in Bladed Rounds for some conditional crit damage if once again you don't mind aiming down sights. It's also where you could put a Riven if you have one, though bear in mind the Riven disposition here is very low, so the rolls are going to be fairly mild. Now, while you don't necessarily need ammo mutation for the Acceltra Prime most of the time, I would still recommend it. Because while the ammo pickup on the weapon is great at 40, so you get a ton of ammo with every ammo pickup, all it takes is just a little bit of bad luck and you're gonna be out. And that's pretty much it for this build. The best thing about it is that it works on its own. There is nothing you really need to add to it, you just put it on the weapon and it works. You don't have to worry about your companion or Warframe. Which cannot be said about this next build, which is actually my preferred build, and it's a kind of build that I've been using a lot recently. It's a fairly straightforward hybrid setup, but it utilizes the new radiated reload to get corrosive radiation and heat. It also runs Hammer Shot because Hammer Shot just rules on this thing. This setup requires an emerald shard, ideally a Tau-forged emerald shard, to give you more corrosive procs. It also benefits heavily from having Viro on your companion as you don't have it on the weapon itself, so it requires much more of a full setup. This is kind of an armor shredder setup, and the idea behind it is that you strip 98% of the enemy armor with corrosive if you have an emerald Tau-forged shard, which gives you +3 corrosive procs. You then strip an additional 1% of the enemy armor with heat procs, and you then use your corrosive and radiation damage to ignore 75% of the remaining ferrite and alloy armor respectively, effectively making the enemies have 0.25% of their total armor whilst retaining the damage bonus you get from using the correct element. This is considerably better than stripping away all of the enemy's armor until very high armor levels. Because just in case you don't know, if you strip all of the enemy's armor, they will lose their armor class and you lose the bonus damage you get on corrosive and radiation versus ferrite and alloy armor. The best part about this build is that it just feels better. I prefer direct damage to damage over time, even though the scaling on it is not as good as on the damage over time builds in some hypothetical super high level scenario. So if you prefer damage over time, go with the first Hunter Munitions build, but if you prefer direct damage, go with this one instead. And finally, before we wrap it all up, I also quickly want to mention Galvanized Aptitude, because as far as I know, Galvanized Aptitude works on the direct hit of the rockets, but not on the explosion, so that's why I didn't use it in any of the builds. You just don't get the full benefit of it, which is why I decided to use Hammer Shot instead. And that's pretty much it for the video, so I thank you very much for watching. As always guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and I would also like to extend a special thank you to all the channel members. Thank you very much guys, I really appreciate your support, it means a lot to me. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.